Welcome, everybody, to the Red and Blue podcast, episode number 1. This is a podcast for first responders by first responders where we cover faith, fire, police, and prayer. We are your hosts. My name is Drew. I am a firefighter EMT, and this is.
My name is Pete. I'm a detective, a fitness enthusiast, and excited to bring you guys some content from a biblical perspective and also just from a legitimate public safety perspective.
One of the things that we both are very passionate about is physical fitness. So today, being episode 1, we want to cover the topic of physical fitness and preparation for public service. Pete has an extensive background in fitness, and I do to an extent as well. So we want to share some of our wisdom and knowledge with you guys.
Yeah, so just to start things off, just so you guys have a brief background, I'm still learning. There's a lot I don't know, but what I do know I think is going to be beneficial for most. Prior to law enforcement, like most people, I started working out in high school in preparation for sports, specifically football, baseball, and basketball. And that kind of led into a passion for it that I pursued in college. And I was pursuing a career in strength conditioning before I entered public safety. And so when I became a cop, my passion just continued to grow. I continued to educate myself in strength conditioning. And it led to a point where I decided to start my own company, and really for the purpose of serving first responders and training tactical athletes. Drew, you were a personal trainer for a long time. How long were you a personal trainer for?
I had started in 2016, so was the math here is about 7 years. Is that right? 7 years.
Yep.
I got into it because I love to see people become the best physical version of themselves, and rather that's build muscle or lose weight or whatever the case may be. But in a job like this, fitness is very important, and not everybody sees it like that. But we, being as passionate about it as we are, we know the benefits of it and the different training techniques that we have and that we utilize. And Pete here, he's even helped expose me to a lot of them. So what are the specifics that people might want to do while they're training for being a first responder?
So the first thing that I'd like to address is training for a police academy or a career in the fire service or military is completely different from actually preparing as a cop, as a firefighter. So typically, to become a cop, to become a firefighter, you have to pass a battery of physical tests, which might include push-ups, sit-ups in a certain period of time, running 1.5 miles, maybe even doing pull-ups, something along those lines, which is great to prepare for those things. But preparing to excel in your field of service is completely different, because it changes from physical fitness and general fitness to mission-specific fitness.
Yeah.
I trained you when you were preparing for your fire career. Maybe you could just explain how things were a little bit different training under my tutelage than how you were trained before.
Yeah. I kind of grew up doing the whole bodybuilding split, leg day, chest day, or arms and tries and just that kind of stuff. But to where Pete really exposed me to more of a plyometric type training, explosiveness, really cardio intense. And I did cardio on my own, of course, but his training was really coupled with weights. So it was very intensive and very specific, which I think is really beneficial to being a first responder, being a police or firefighter, because like Pete had mentioned, we're not only being fit for the sake of being fit, but it's mission specific. And it's also preparing to win the fight, whatever that fight may be, whether it's doing, a home rescue from a fire or even a home rescue as being a police officer.
Absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head. You essentially become a tactical athlete when you enter your form of service, whatever that may be. So what I mean is that when you become a tactical athlete, lives are on the line. So you're no longer training to get hired. Now you're trained to save someone else's life, a citizen, a coworker, or your own.
Yeah.
So the way that we do training is focused on those mission specific goals. So you mentioned plyometric training. That's a critical part. Whether you're a police officer doing foot pursuits, you're routinely climbing 6-foot fences and jumping off them. If
Yeah.
you're not prepared for those plyometric bouts at work, which happen at the snap of their fingers, you're liable to get hurt, whether that be Achilles tear. I've seen that happen in my career, or other catastrophic injuries. The next thing is you got to be strong.
Yeah.
Some people think that cops need to be strong. Well, so do firemen. A lot of firemen who are working in rural areas with elderly populations, you're routinely going to medical calls and having to pick people up. Picking people up off the ground that are limp and basically dead weight is extremely taxing on the lower back and on the spine. So if you're not doing some kind of heavy lifting in the lower body, whether that be deadlift, squatting, or some variation of that, you're really setting yourself up for an injury. And when you're talking, most of us are doing a 20 or 30-year career these days. It's not looking good if you're not training.
Yeah.
The other two aspects that I like to add into the training are an intensive cardio aspect, like you mentioned. The reason for that is if you don't have gas in the tank, how are you going to be of good use to anybody in a high stress situation? If you are the police officer and you're responding to an active shooter and you have to run across a parking lot and your heart rate's going through the roof, how are you going to take an accurate shot if it's a hostage scenario or whatever the case may be? If you're a soup sandwich in that scenario, you're no good for anybody. In the same way in the fire industry, if you don't have the cardio to make it up 10 flights of stairs, how are you going to save somebody when you get there?
Right.
You got to have gas in the tank. And lastly, I like to add strongman training in because it's a great way to, again, increase your cardio, increase raw strength, and also mimic those worst case scenarios. So whether that be an officer rescue, a citizen rescue, if you're carrying something, dragging something backwards or forwards, it's a great way to get cardio in and get an actual specific exercise that's going to mimic those worst case scenarios that you may encounter in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially, there's so many different scenarios that both police and firefighters face. Like for, a firefighter, pulling hose, a charged line is so heavy, and depending how far you got to pull this thing, your cardio is going to be up here very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So being conditioned for that, is super important. And like he said, you got no gas in the tank to do the job when you get to that, specific location. What good are we? So that's why, me and Pete, really stress the fact of being physically fit for public service. And like he said, core strength, protecting your back. You can easily blow your back out doing the most minute thing. But if you're taking the time to condition it, to strengthen it, make it better, you're going to go such a long way in your career and keep yourself safe.
Absolutely. The stakes are high in our line of work.
Yeah.
If you're a banker or a lawyer and you decide not to do PT, what's going to happen? Nothing. If you're a cop or a firefighter and there's a mass casualty scenario and you haven't done anything to prepare for that, you're going to be a mess. And instead of being an asset, you're going to be a liability. You're a liability to the coworkers next to you, and your liability to the community because they need someone who's prepared and ready to be the person that they need in that time of crisis, and you're not going to be able to fulfill that mission.
Yeah.
So being an athlete, what happens when you're not as physically prepared as the next guy? You lose the game.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Okay. In our line of work, someone's life could potentially get lost. And that's why it's that much more important to be physically prepared for your whatever your mission is. Be prepared specifically for that mission.
Yeah.
There's other reasons. We could go on for a long time. I mean, you look at the life expectancy of cops. I believe it's in the 60s right now. You know, you talk about the constant adrenaline going up and down because of the high stress calls you're going to, and just that lifestyle of eating poorly, not exercising, not getting enough sleep, working graveyard, all those things compound. So the way that I look at it, as a father of 3 children, I want to take care of my body as best as possible, not only for the community and for self-preservation, but also because I want to be there for my family after my career. I want to be the guy who's 70 years old, still working out, still doing push-ups and bench pressing, and riding my bike, doing all those things, rather than being in bad shape at that time and being a statistic of that low life expectancy.
Yeah. Especially heart health, cardiovascular health, in the line of work, like you said, foot pursuits, or even like somebody, firefighter wearing a mask. If you're ever on air, you have to breathe a certain way to conserve your air. Otherwise, you may not get to where you're supposed to go, or may not make it back from where you were, because the oxygen tank only lasts so long. Now, sure, can you go through multiple bottles? Yeah, of course you can. But to be as effective as possible, it's breath control, and that comes a long way of heart health and cardio health. And one of the things that me and Pete talk about is diet, which I know is like the hardest thing to do because food is delicious. But the best diet, as Pete has always said to me, is a diet you can adhere to.
Yeah, like you said, whatever diet you choose that you can adhere to in the long term is going to be the most effective. There's some people who like to do the keto thing. There's others who do, the South Beach diet or a moderate carbohydrate diet. It really doesn't matter when you're talking about that. That's going to be specific to every different person. I'm working with guys right now who are doing the carnivore diet and are doing really well with it. I personally get screaming headaches when I just eat meat and nothing else. So I typically fall back on a carnivore-like diet, but I add in fruits and I add in a small amount of dark chocolate in there to keep myself sane.
Gotta have some sweets.
We put you on a diet that was pretty similar to that. Your diet was kind of a quasi carnivore with fruit, and then I allowed a third bar of chocolate a day. And maybe you could just go over the results that you got from that, like as far as how much weight you dropped, your strength levels, and that kind of thing. And I also want to throw this out there. We're talking about all this stuff. We're not doctors. So before you start any exercise or diet program, consult with your doctor. We don't know, what you specifically are dealing with. So, take our advice as a grain of salt. We're really just explaining what's worked for us and what might work for you.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed the diet that Pete had me try. And to me, like, it tasted good, as well as I think I ended up losing 27 pounds, I'm pretty sure. And then, which was crazy, is that my strength consistently increased every week while my weight was going down, which is pretty hard to do, but it happened. So I got nothing but good to say about that. But just a diet. What's that?
That's a product of your hard work too. So you got to put in the work. And you clearly did that. And there's nothing out there there's no rule that says if you diet, you can't get stronger while you're doing it.
Yeah.
There's no real rule out there that says you can't do that. Now, for some people who are very highly trained and who are used to eating 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, if you restrict their calories, you're more than likely you're gonna lose some muscle, you're gonna lose some strength. But for most of us, that doesn't have to be the case. Because when I went on the same diet, I had similar results. I was losing weight and I was getting stronger. Yeah, so kind of like what I said in the beginning, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I typically recommend low to moderate carbohydrate diets, and I've got reasons for that we don't need to go into now. But for most people don't do well on higher carbohydrate diets. I, for one, I pack on weight like crazy. There's new studies out there that talk about insulin sensitivity and how that decreases when you're employed in public service because of the stress. So that's just something to keep an eye on, something to try out. I think you were on about 75 grams of carbohydrates a day, which is pretty low, but definitely not in the keto range. A lot of guys that are doing keto are, well under 50 grams per day, probably closer to 25. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as we get ready to close here, we just wanted to again stress the importance of, being physically fit and preparation for public service and adhering to a good diet, because you never know when your life or someone else's life might be on the line. Pete, do you have any closing comments for episode number 1 here?
Yeah, we just want to be a source of encouragement for you guys. We want to bring family friendly, but real conversation about, a wide range of different talks. And really, this is about, glorifying the Lord and doing his work. And so one way you can think about your training is you want to be a vessel of honor, a vessel that's prepared to do the work that the Lord puts in front of you, whatever that may be.
Well, I want to thank you for watching episode number 1 of the Red and Blue podcast. Please tune in for new episodes every week here as we discuss faith, family, prayer, fire, fitness, the whole 9. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.